Hi there, everybody, and welcome to this video interview. I'm Graham Fletcher, and I'm here blessed to be joined by Stephen Young, who I've got a lot of admiration for as a musician, recording artist, and now author of this fantastic book, A Fool's Wisdom. I don't think you can see that; it's not going proper focus.
Sorry, I got one here.
Yeah, this absolutely fantastic book that Stephen's written called A Fool's Wisdom, Science, Conspiracies, and the Secret Art of Alchemy. And wow, what a book. I'm absolutely inspired to have read this. And I remember when I got this book, my partner bought it for me on Amazon, and I was just sat in a hammock outside in the sun going, oh my gosh, wow, it's quite an incredible read. And it's so accessible, the way that Steve, his writing style, how he summarizes simple but deep concepts about the world through his own lived life experience. And yeah, so I'm really happy and excited to interview Steve. There's quite a few things I would love to chat to him about. There's loads of interviews with Steve on the internet, sharing his wisdom and his insights and what he's doing in the world, which I would encourage you to go and look at. So we're going to try and cover some different aspects to interviews, that trying to figure out some questions and areas that Steve hasn't covered in depth in other interviews. But yeah, how are you doing this morning, Steve? Are you enjoying some lovely sunny weather there in Scotland?
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, I'm doing good. It's beautiful. Yeah, blue sky again. It's been almost like 2 straight weeks of gorgeous weather now. So yeah, I'm a happy Scotsman. Yeah.
Yeah. Dispelling the rumours that it never has sunshine in Scotland.
Yeah. I haven't complained about the weather for nearly 2 weeks.
Wowza. No, beautiful. Yeah, it really does lift the spirits, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I'm long since removed from Scotland, but I still have got lots of memories of nice summers in Scotland as well. So I haven't got that deeper negative programming that I think that it's all bleak up there. But
yeah, no. Yeah, still lots of natural beauty, and when the weather's well behaved, it's absolutely glorious. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I think Steve and I have discussed a bit of a plan. I think we're going to freestyle through a number of kind of topics that are covered in Steve's book. If there's anything that we do reference, I'll try and put links in the notes. So if we refer to a book or we refer to a video or another podcast, I'll try and have a nice, easy reference for people to kind of like go and expand their knowledge. So just in summary, I was just going to sort of introduce my kind of perspective. I'm really interested in critical thinking. I'm really interested in questioning attachments to information, people, systems, that kind of thing. Very curious kind of person. And I like to see past the programmed world and look at the world from what actually works or happens in reality, like experiential learning, living in the real world would be an important aspect that I think hopefully we'll explore. The power of words and music to transform. I think Steve's an amazing teacher on this, and in his book, the power of his words is incredible. You can see some amazing reviews of Steve's book online, you know, from loads of different people from different backgrounds, and he really has condensed stuff down in a fantastic way. And it's all about understanding your inner power. That's what I really get from Steve. He's done a lot of soul searching and transformation in his life. And I'm very interested in self-mastery through experiential kind of living. So I hope that gives viewers a general idea of what Steve and I might be about to discuss, but I'm not going to edit this conversation down. We're going to freestyle, and then we'll get to the end, and it will just be it will stay there. So yeah, how we connected, I left a glowing review for Steve online on Amazon via my partner's account. My partner left it after I emailed a review, and I've been a few emails with Steve, but there was one, he recently did a talk which I'd highly recommend watching in Edinburgh. Is that right, Steve? You were doing a talk?
Yeah, the live in Edinburgh talk, yeah.
Yeah. And how did that go? It looked like it was a great event.
It was great. Yeah. It was about 80 people, and it sold out. And a lot of awake people, a good community in Edinburgh that had formed there during the pandemic and stuff. So Yeah, great to connect with them, and yeah, it went very well. And yeah, I used your glowing review right at the start because it is probably my favorite review. And I think you did it quite early on, like not too long after the book was released as well. And where you gave the book a score, and you know, I made an error. I assumed that this score had been achieved by an app. I just made that assumption, and I, like, as you say, it's like, don't assume, because it makes an ass out of you and me, right? So
again, you were saying so much in that talk. I mean, there was like how you manage, you know, the amount of information shared in it was like quite incredible. So like, I'm very gentle about it, but I thought I'd get in touch and go, well, Steve, actually, this is how I kind of got this a bit of data, so to speak. And it's an interesting thing that people who are true seekers can look into, using kinesiology muscle testing, or dowsing, as it might be called. Or I think when I was chatting to you the other day, you said it sounded like divination kind of thing. So you can use these kind of internal technologies that are, you know, your body's connected to everything that is, and you can ask questions to divine source about people, information. And I think it's a you know, fantastic thing. So when I was kind of reading your book, it was like scoring really, really high. You know, obviously your lived experience with studying science. What was your qualification in again?
So my master's is theoretical physics, and then my PhD was nuclear physics. And nuclear physics is an application of quantum physics, essentially. So it's quantum theory applied to the modeling of atoms and nuclei and nuclear reactions. Yeah.
And as a child, were you a studious academic child? I was trying to envisage, like, you know, a young Steve and your pathway on how you kind of started education-wise.
Well, yeah, I'm an only child, so I don't have any brothers or sisters. So, you know, I had a lot of time, you know, just by myself, you know, just like playing or reading or whatever. And I took a liking to physics and maths, you know, during high school, and I'd read some stuff about physics, like some stuff about Einstein, like black holes and time travel and wormholes, you know, and all that sort of like the general relativity, like the you know, I read a lot of that stuff. I'd just kind of come across it when I was quite young, and I thought that was really exciting, and it seemed like that was the future, right? Because I'd also been watching science fiction growing up, Star Wars and Star Trek and everything. So I believed that was our future, and so physics being, you know, this sort of futuristic science, I thought that's where I need to invest my time. And so I wasn't super studious, but, you know, I did read. You know, I did a lot of extracurricular reading, and when I was at university as well, I mean, I went to all the classes, and, you know, I was reading, you know, getting books on quantum physics from the library, and like sitting up late at night reading them and stuff like that, you know. Yeah, so like I really got my head deep into it. And my PhD thesis here, you know, it's like 120 pages of, you know, quantum physics equations, and you know, so I'm actually, at the moment, I'm working on a new presentation about quantum physics, and, you know, why I'm skeptical of it now. But yeah, so I eventually went from a full like believer, you know, practitioner of quantum physics to being a full skeptic of quantum physics, you know, in the last like 20 years or so since I left uni. Yeah.
And what's that process been like? Because when I think of things like this, I think of attachments, you know, whether, you know, so you put an incredible amount into this learning, you got absolutely super deep, more than a lot of other people might, and you got a really positive result in terms of your academic results. How did it feel, like this process of like, was it a long time to let go of these attachments to that process? Because you'd invested a lot of time and energy. I'd be interested to know about how that felt.
Yes. Yeah, it does take a bit of time. I mean, there's a lot, people have a lot of pride invested in these things, and I was no different. I was very proud of my, education, being called a doctor and everything.
Mm.
But as like I mean, as I've talked about before, I mean, I had 6 months of unemployment after the PhD, right? And then that was a real sinking. It was a dark time because I was just sinking like deeper and deeper into debt. And I was just getting rejection after rejection for like jobs I was applying for. And I was talking to recruitment agencies and things like that, and they were just like, well, we don't really know what to do with with these skills you have. They sound great and everything, but no one sort of needs this stuff. What can you actually do that businesses need and stuff like that? And it was a hard sell. I didn't. I mean, I had done some computer programming, but we were using such old computer languages that it was not relevant to any jobs. Like I couldn't, for example, get a job in the gaming industry or something, right? Because they're all using this like C++ and these advanced coding languages, whereas I'd just been trained in this like 1970s real like basic like programming language doing nuclear physics with so yeah, so even though technically I should have been a skilled programmer when I left uni, but because the tech was so old, I wasn't really. I didn't really have any useful skills, So there was that side of it, and then I eventually got a job, and of course life goes on from there. But I always, that was like my initiation into the real world. And then 5 years later, when I actually quit my job to go full time with music, I was very much in the spirit of wanting to be of service to the world, and I felt that I had this talent and this desire to make music, and therefore that was the best way I could be of service to people. And once again, I couldn't think of any application of my education that I could actually use to help others in terms of making something or starting a business than music. Music and synthesizers are like physics in a box.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's so things like Ableton Live and these Cubase and all this stuff were just like absolutely mesmerizing to me. And I would so you were actually working with a lot of these same functions and equations that you're doing in physics, but the difference is you can hear them and feel them. Right. When you're sitting in the classroom solving the equations on the calculators and drawing the graphs and stuff like that, it's very dry, right? It's unemotional. It's it's kind of boring and monotonous. But when you start working with the math through synthesizers, the quantities become qualities.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're now starting to like feel the effect of these things. And so in my mind, it was like electronic music was the best application of physics that I could think to devote myself to. And of course, you can do electronic music without any physics background at all. It's it's also very intuitive, but I approached it from a scientific perspective.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can really hear an absolute deepness of soul in your music. I mean, I'd highly recommend. I'm going to put some links to your Bandcamp. There's a particular track called Corvid Phase, which every time, I think what's genius about that track is the minute it starts, you know the track instantly from the melody, like from the first couple of bars, which is a powerful music writing skill for any musician. That if you can recognize a track that quickly. And there's a beautiful kind of energy to it, which I think later in the interview we'll come back to music and talk about your understanding about 432 frequencies and sacred sonic frequencies. But yeah, there's something amazing there that with your scientific mind, but also the combination of emotions that you've created. So yeah, I love listening to your music. Can I ask, at that stage, were you aware of alchemy? Because when you started that shift in your jump into music, because I've read some interviews with you where you're talking about how you had this great success with your first EP, and it sounds like you were doing alchemy and you didn't know about it. and then maybe you learnt about it later. I was just wondering if you knew about it at the start of that process.
Yeah, no, but that was what I was saying to people when I discovered alchemy. That was what I would say to them. I was like, we're doing it, but we don't realize it. Yeah, okay,
Right.
So after I got into music full time, maybe like 2 or 3 years into it, so like 2012, 2013, I was starting to have these kind of existential, you know, crises over like what am I actually doing? What is this? Like, what is head flux? What does it mean? What is this life that I've devoted myself to? And when I, started looking into alchemy, and I learned it was all about transformation. That was the first thing I had understood, is the science of transformation. And this was probably around about 2013. And it just really clicked, because I realized, well, transformation is physical, but it's and spiritual. And so that's the link. That's how science is that's how alchemy is a science of spirit and of matter, because transformation is the common thread between spirit and matter. It's like everything can be transformed. And that's essentially what we're doing with music. You're taking samples or waveforms, which are just like basic bits of data, and then you're transforming them into a piece of music, and then distributing that, and then that's going in people's minds, and then they're listening and reporting transformational experiences, listening to it and stuff. So it just clicked. This relationship between alchemy and music struck me deeply, and I came up with this idea of audio alchemy.
Sure.
And then I started basically joining music and alchemy together as tightly as I could.
And was there a particular book or entranceway into the world of alchemy that kind of like woke you up, or was what was the moment with alchemy that you were like, okay, I'm suddenly here, and wow, this is suddenly almost like a huge opening up into a whole different way of thinking? Was there a particular point that you recall?
I think my first sort of like time I actually felt like I got it. It was a YouTube video, and I'm struggling to remember the name of it now. It's by Luxor Media. I think it's Sacred Secrets Revealed. That's it. Sacred Secrets Revealed, and it talks through the 7 steps of alchemy, the calcination, dissolution, and so on, and what they mean in terms of chemistry, but also what they mean in terms of psychology.
Right.
And so seeing how they made the correspondence between chemical operations and psychological operations, that helped me to make the correspondence to music, because there's this relationship between chemistry, psychology, and music. They're closely related. People take chemicals and go and listen to music, and then things happen in their mind, right? There's like this, the whole of like shamanism is based on that principle, really, of like taking a chemical or an alchemical substance, something that's been purified or refined or combined, taking that and then playing music to the body while that substance is active in the blood, and magic happens. The music and the medicine just like go together, and like magic happens. And this is the basis of the whole rave culture, and where it comes from, why people go and take drugs and dance and listen to music. It comes from this shamanic practice. So that I'd done some shamanic ceremonies and stuff myself. So when I learned about the alchemical processes, it helped me to understand what had been happening in these shamanic ceremonies, but then also helped me understand the relationship between music and psychology and chemistry. And so, I really just dived into that for, several years. And I was living in Hawaii, and there was another guy I was working with called Andy Freest, or now Andy Freeland. And we put on a series of retreats, 4 retreats in Hawaii to teach people about this.
Yeah, so I think there's some lectures online where you talk in more depth about the audio alchemy, which I'll put a link to, because I took great interest watching those. So there's some of that content out, and I think you've even got like a something on your website with a head flux that people can subscribe, and you've got a little kind of teaching course about sacred sonics, haven't you?
Yes, on the headflux.com website, there is a subscription. I haven't updated it for a while, but there's about, 30, 35 hours worth of live streams on alchemy and music production that were recorded between like 2020 and 2022. So there's a bunch of stuff there to dig in, and my hair is very long, and I still have the man bun and everything. But yeah, forget about that.
You've been through a few looks.
Yeah, I've been through it. I was still in my hippie phase.
So can I ask? So was that the corresponding moment then when you started to look back at your science educational experience? Was it a similar time where you then suddenly going, oh my gosh? Looking back, I think in your book you call it Scientism, is one of your overarching phraseologies. And for anybody, my intention is in this interview to focus on things in the second half of your book. But for viewers, it's a book of two halves. There's one half where Steve really debunks and simplifies his understanding of lots of aspects of science and how they're interlinked. And then the second half of the book's about alchemy. But do you want to talk a little bit now about just that, if that was the moment that you look back in the science and you could summarize your kind of general oversight about your kind of experience? Yes,
I mean, well, when I started down the shamanic route, which was, way back in like 2006, something like that, my mind was open to sort of, non-materialistic thinking. Essentially, I'd had, experienced visions and out-of-body experiences and things like that. Very, very lucid, clear experiences, which had, convinced me of other dimensions, the spirit world, and even afterlife. Things that we had questions about it, whether the afterlife is real or whether life just ends when you die. But through a lot of that stuff, I became just convinced. I felt like I just had a knowing that there's a spirit world and a sense of it just being there. And so, that sort of undermined my scientific education. That was like the first time I really started to undermine a lot of the science I'd been told. And I was starting to see how it is rooted in very materialistic, sort of anti-spiritual thinking. And then, I was, researching conspiracies and going down a lot of rabbit holes and everything. So, I had gone down various rabbit holes to do with the universe, the nature of the universe, the nature of the cosmos. And I was already aware that it's probably not what we've been told. But it was really in 2020, of course, when everything else kicked off. So, I mean, to give some perspective, like I had not been watching the news for years, like, I mean, over a decade even. Like, to do the whole thing I did, quit my job, do Headflux as a full-time thing, I wasn't watching the news. I wasn't consuming popular culture, like pop music or anything like that. I just kind of was making music, playing shows, and building my brand, and there was a culture sort of forming around that. And, I was fitting into a larger electronic music culture at the same time. And I was also researching conspiracies and, looking into science stuff and, weird, mysteries and all that kind of stuff. That was like, did a lot of research as well. I wasn't just working on music all day, every day, right? Even as much as you think you might like to when you first do it. It's like, every day, I'm just going to churn out banger after banger. It's like, it doesn't work like that. So I was doing a lot of research, conspiracy research as well. But then, so then in 2020, everything kicked off, and someone had said to me, you better look into this coronavirus thing. And I was like, no, it's just another media narrative. It'll be over in a couple of weeks. And they're like, no, I think this one's going to be here for a while. I was like, all right, I'll look into it, So I started looking into that and viruses, and I found a documentary called Do Viruses Exist? I don't know who made it. I probably haven't seen it for about 5 years, but I started looking into that, and it just went through a lot of like the logic and the problems, like the sort of theoretical leaps that are made within virology to make a lot of the claims that they do.
Yeah.
And it was eye-opening, and but also wasn't surprising to me because I trained in theoretical science, and so I was well aware that a large part of what we call science is theoretical, like entirely theoretical, and there's another part which is practical, and the two do not always meet. A
Right.
lot of theoretical stuff is just pure air,
Yeah.
it's just in the mind, and it doesn't actually meet the physical world through any application. But nevertheless, that doesn't stop people making claims about theories being real or not, and so yeah, and then that then put me sort of on the outside of the whole pandemic situation, because I was adamant there's just no such thing as viruses. And so yeah, and then I met a lot of other doctors and scientists who were on the same page, like the people like Andrew Kaufman and Tom Cowan, and I don't know if you know a lot of these guys, but they've been saying this kind of thing for a long time. And then there's essentially a whole community of natural health practitioners who have rejected this sort of modern germ theory, and so yeah, coming out of that, I sort of took that knowledge and the way that problem had been approached, and then I looked back at nuclear physics, quantum physics, and like the theory of atoms and stuff, which was like my sort of bread and butter.
Right.
And I started to see a lot of the same problems, these logical fallacies, or these like leaps of logic where something abstract has been just written down, and then some claim has been made about how it must be in the universe somewhere, or doing something or whatever. And it just looked a bit different, and it's but so some of what, it's not that everything that they do is incorrect, right? It's not like that, because quantum physics is actually based on classical physics.
Right.
So a lot of what they do actually works because it's based on science that works, but it's been tweaked and reframed in terms of this new world, this wacky new world of quantum, where the rules of logic no longer apply, and there's all these strange phenomena that nobody can see or whatever. But so this I started to smell the BS a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
And how did that feel from like an attachment process of like, those things that, like you'd grafted for a long time with all this, science efforts and a passion that you had from an early age. How did that feel at that time? Was it a kind of tough time when you were like, it sounds almost like a pyramid, loads of levels of the pyramid just kind of going gajung, gajung, gajung. And I'm just wondering how that landed with you. Was that a good enlightening process, or was it a little bit painful, or how was that?
Yeah, a bit of both. Yeah, I mean, my wife calls it the tower moment, right? It's like the tower card in the tarot. It's like, or like you just described it, like the pyramid falling, or like the twin tower free falling into the ground. It's that kind of thing. This tower that you've built up in your mind, and I use, of course, the analogy of a tower, the Tower of Babel, to describe this scientific structure, because that is the best view for it. And so, yeah, it was it was tough, and I kept quiet for a long time about it. This was, of course, in the midst of all the the insane like pandemic propaganda and the rollout of the jabs and everything like that. So I had a lot of other problems to deal with, but yeah, I at that time I thought I can't talk about this. No one's gonna believe me. Yada yada. I was very down in the dumps about it, and I started to get like a pain in my mouth and throat.
Right.
And this was, interesting. I was like, my gums and teeth and around here just like pain, like unbelievable pain. And I go to the dentist rather, and he's looking at my teeth, and he's like, there's nothing, I can't see anything wrong, I can't see what's going on here. And anyway, his friend sent me an article about German new medicine. And, this idea that like every sort of symptom we get is due to a conflict. And then, I started to realize the connection that, this is like the throat chakra all around here, right? The throat chakra, which is your communication, where you speak from, right? And all the pain is like around there. And anyway, I came to the realization that it was holding back my truth that was causing the pain. And the next morning I went on Telegram and I wrote this massive big rant about like vaccines and everything. I just got it all out, and the pain went away. Never came back. Right? It was like, and I feel like like the words were like stuck. You know what I mean? They were like the energy had like come so far, but had not actually released it. And yeah, it was a total relief, and then I started speaking out more, after that. But yeah, it was just that sense of just going to lose everything, your career. I mean, your career, my music career was already kind of over at that point, in the sense of I knew it was never going to recover from the division and everything that happened in like 2020. I can still continue to make music, but I can't continue in the way I was. Yeah. So yeah, I was, I mean, the scene became very divided, and I was kind of coming of age as well. So I mean, I was 42 years old when this happened. So I'd sort of lived my dream, and I needed to sort of let go of the boy. The boy and embrace the older man, right? Which is like the fool and the wise man, right? That's like the polarity. So that's how I called the book of Fool's Wisdom, right? Because I was like looking back at myself as the DJ, traveling around, like playing music and everything, and I saw myself in this very sort of foolish light. But then also with all the alchemy I was learning and the wisdom I'd gained from life, I could also see this sort of like wise man within me, and yeah. So anyway, between those, so the book is like, it was written as I'm kind of coming through that process myself of trying to like maybe let go of the folly and embrace the wisdom.
Sure, yeah. I mean, your book's got a fantastic intro where you talk about the concept of the fool. When you say, the fool is playful, you're a sincere fool, you're a professional fool. And you talk about the cultural history around the role of the fool in palaces of times gone back with kings and queens, and it's quite a powerful introduction. I think it's like the start of your book. When I was reading it, I was just like, oh yeah, this is really fascinating. So you're kind of do you want to talk any more about that dimension to it? Because it's a fascinating title, and I think when we're talking about things that are about attachments to information, and we're talking about self-mastery, talking playfully and creatively, conceptually about these ideas is quite intriguing, because I think lots of people will engage with that, So it would be cool for you to expand on that, I think.
Yeah, well, I defined the fool, and it was just a definition I came up with, as one who plays.
Yeah.
And because I found that was like a sort of common thread among all the sort of different kinds of fools I was looking at. So like whether it's like a sincere fool, who's just like having fun, entertainment, or you have like the trickster, who's more like a sort of malicious fool, who's maybe trying to trick you or con you, but maybe for good reason, that you don't yet know, but nevertheless, but then you have like jesters or comedians, who very much, obviously the pressure is on to make people laugh. I'm not that kind of a fool. I mean, I can make a joke, but I'm not professionally there to make people laugh. But then I thought about musicians and even like sports stars. It's like basically what's the difference is being paid to play, right? It's like most people get paid to work, right. Move stuff or help somebody or do something, but fools get paid to play, right? It's just got to play either for entertainment or for sport or whatever it is. There's a playful element to it, and playing can be vulnerable. I mean, it is vulnerable, particularly in a world where things are so serious, and like serious things happen, and people have real problems, and there's death and genocide and all this stuff. So to just like show up in public with a big smile on your face and, do a little dance kind of thing. It's, that's the fool, right? It's like, and we need him, like, especially in dark times, it's like we need to know that there are still people out there who are, playing and being foolish and bringing some joy, just reflecting back something other than just fear and despair over life, right? It's like, so, yeah, so it relates to, obviously, yeah, they say the jester and the comedian, like sports stars, like DJs, musicians. And there's this Heoka in the Native American traditions. I think it's the Hopi tradition. There's these Heoka, which means a sacred clown.
Right.
And, the Heoka would, just dress differently from everyone else in the tribe and sort of live completely differently. But, kind of like the inverse of everyone else. They say the Heoka lives life backwards to everyone else. They say that about the fool as well. It's like a, the world does one thing, the fool does the opposite. And the fool, of course, is also allowed and expected to say things that, normal folk wouldn't say because they'd be too worried about losing their jobs, But then fool is also a derogatory term that is used when people think you're crazy for your opinions, right? They say you're a fool. So, so I'd been called a fool in a derogatory way, but I was also a fool in a professional sense in that I was paid to be entertainment. And being someone who's a conspiracy theorist, right? It's like you're basically on the opposite side from the majority who believe the narrative, right? And being a DJ as well, I realized you're often living life opposite to people as well. So if you think like most people will go to work Monday to Friday, and then they'll all come out to like party at the weekend, and then you go to work. When they're all going to party, you go to work, and they're all on one side of the stage, you're on the other side of the stage, and then they all go back home and go back to work, and then you go home and go to sleep while they're all at work. So in a way, you're in this like underside of the world, but backstage, behind the veil, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. You use the conspiracy theorist kind of phraseology there, but I think it's very interesting times because a lot of people seem to be not seeing what the conspiracy is and accepting the theories just because they're so well propagated. And I think language is a curious kind of thing, isn't it? I think and it's very good to be aware of these nuanced details nowadays. But yeah, I think what fascinates me about you is this beautiful journey. It seems on a number of stages. You did the alchemizing without maybe even knowing it, with following your passion with music. You had a successful release. You ended up you'd had this vision. I'm going to play this festival. I remember you saying in one of your other interviews. You managed to get a gig at that festival, and then the whole process was one of alchemy in action, but you didn't quite understand what you were doing at that time. And then you built that kind of up, and then it's come to another phase in time when actually there's been a challenge, and then you've taken that and alchemized that kind of process. And I'm guessing there's loads of lovely bits of intuition coming in, or guidance, or in these moments of soul searching, you were able to go, I've got this. You recognize the throat chakra thing going on, I need to speak, I need to move forward, I need to share this. And a bit like the music process, you're alchemizing your knowledge into something that has a vibrational resonance with other people. Because your reviews, for your book are fantastic. There's so many rich interviews from different people from different backgrounds. And I don't think it's just a book for intellectual people or scientific people. You're really good at simplifying stuff. so that people can get the bite-sized chunks, you know. So that I was interested, you know, do you think that comes back to your Scottish heritage, a bit of straight talking, kind of Celtic kind of roots, or?
Well, maybe. I mean, you know, I didn't want it to be the book to be only for people who had been to a science degree, you know, people who had a science degree, for example, right? So that's why I didn't go too deep into quantum physics in the book, for example. I just talked about the theory of atoms and you know, just looked at that like as a whole and how that developed and how it's been used and everything. It was because I didn't want to go too deep into the theories that people may or may not have heard of, and keep it at a philosophical level, which is readable and accessible, because a lot of people, they get programmed by this stuff even though they didn't go to university to learn it, right? So that they didn't go and sit all the exams and read all the books and, you know, do all the classes, but, you know, they watch the documentaries on Netflix, they see the influencers talking about it online, yada yada. So they're still getting programmed with the same theories and philosophies, even though they didn't personally go and study it. So I tried to keep that in mind and, you know, make it accessible to people who maybe even just have a passing interest in science, so they could see where it's come from. You know, I mean, like, you know, in Alchemy, they talk about how there's 3 levels to the work. You have philosophy, theory, and practice. And so, yeah, when you know, that's what I really wanted to do, was like break that down and show that for all science, there is a philosophy, which is the belief system that led to the creation of the science. And then there's the theory, which is like the thoughts, you know, that they've had. I mean, an equation is just a thought, right? That's written down and into a numerical form, like a relationship or a symbolic form. So theory is like all the thoughts and stuff, and then practice, well, that's what they actually do, right? It's what they build. So, yeah, when you break it down like that, and you look at where these ideas came from, what it is they actually say in their theories, and then what it is they actually do, which is usually nothing. No practice, right? This was the clue, right? It's when I started looking into it, I'm realizing that there's no fruits, right? There's that quote from the Bible, "Ye shall know them by their fruits," right. And it means that if you want to know whether something is any good or not, look to the fruits, right? The fruit is the end product of the labor. It's like they've been doing all this work, saying all this stuff. Well, what is the actual end product? What's being produced at the end of it? And you know, the more I started looking into it, I was just like, nothing. It's just nothing.
Well, I would offer, the other way,
like data analysis, programming, modeling, you know, just on and on and on, but no fruit.
There's, I think, an interesting way to look at that on top as well is if you think of, if you ingest the fruits that are false, what's it going to do to your mind or your body? You know, so if you do take in stuff and you're told that there is an outcome, so the fruits are almost like poison. You know, you're theoretically poisoning your beautiful mind that you've been gifted with, or you're poisoning your connection with divine source. And you could be poisoning your kind of physical body that's connected to your subconscious mind, you know? Yeah. So I think that fruit thing's quite a powerful kind of analogy, isn't it?
It is.
On levels, yeah.
Yeah, on multiple levels. I mean, the rest of the quote, I mean, you know, it talks about how, you know, fruit will never be corrupted unless it's a corrupt tree. Like a corrupted tree will always produce a corrupted fruit. But if a tree is not corrupted, then the fruit will never be corrupted. And, you know, it's like nothing bad actually gets into fruit, because the fruit is produced through a series of purification processes, so that it's the end result. The end result of the purification is the fruit. Yeah. So there can't really be anything bad in there unless the tree is corrupt.
Right. So
yeah.
You've got to keep your eye out for the trees then, what the tree looks like.
Yeah. Well, the trees are the theories. Yeah, so the trees are the theories, right? The trees of the mind. They're like the theories that we build in our minds to try and make sense of the world. Yeah.
and often they're built on presumptions that we haven't had the time to look into at particular depth. I think I was telling you in a pre-conversation, there was a fascinating book called The Shallows, which is all about how the internet's affecting the depth of thinking that people are doing nowadays. You know, everybody's just looking at a phone. They've got a phone addiction. They're looking at the first page of Google. I'm just taking this from the first page of Google. So like that deeper critical reflection of data, or the trees where they're picking their fruit from, they're just going, well, it's the internet, you know. And I suppose for me, I like to live in the real world. So back in the time period that you referred to earlier, I wouldn't use the phraseology, but it rhymes with Cocktown. But I didn't. I was just interested, you know. I'll go to the supermarket that I always go to, and I'll ask how all the members of staff are regularly. You know, what's going on for frontline workers? Is this a real thing? The real life data told me everything I needed to know. You know, the same people were there time in, time out. They're all keeping fairly healthy. And, you know, that was enough real world data for me to kind of assimilate, which was, I found really powerful at the time.
Yeah, it's like getting your information from the real world instead of through the virtual. Yeah, absolutely. I remember doing that at the time as well, just sensing the energy around you, and then basing your absolutely.
Yeah, basing it what you can see and hear rather than what you've been programmed to see and hear.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you choose to feed yourself off that tree, so to speak, you know. So can I just ask before we go any further, like the alchemizing process of your book, were you using AI technology for the writing process, or is it like a real kind of I'm interested as a creative person who's written my own book and writes music, to just understand your process of you know, how long it took you to write it and how you came about it, because it's very did you have some people overlooking it going, Steve, yeah, this is a bit too waffly? Because it didn't feel like that at all. So actually it was a very disciplined book. You get to the end of it, and I love roller coasters, and I love going on roller coaster rides. And I got to the end of it, and I was like, "Wow, that was a ride!" And you literally got to the end and go, and I could say more, but you had to stop at some point. And so, just intrigued just about your process, and I think it could be interesting.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't use AI for the writing of the book. You know, like getting into AI as a research tool has really just been in the last sort of year or two. But no, I'd written articles, just, you know, unpublished articles over the years, and on different topics, you know. So like ones about atoms and nuclear, and other ones about astrophysics and cosmology, you know. So I'd collected some articles. I had notes that I'd gathered over the years, and you know, I was scared. I was scared of doing the science debunking, right? I was, as you know, a lot of people, they're too scared to come out of the closet and say what they really think about science, because they know they'll get ridiculed and maybe like attacked and stuff, or cancelled even. So, you know, I was scared of that, and I just wanted to write a book about alchemy. I'm like, just write a book about alchemy, but I couldn't consciously write the book about alchemy without acknowledging the fact that, like, all the science I've been taught just goes directly against this beautiful science of alchemy. In fact, it's so against it that you know, I started to think, has it actually been created specifically to hide alchemy through some, like, by distorting it or reflecting it in some distorted way? And I go into that in the book, how, like, you know, everything in physics does seem to have a correspondence in alchemy, as if they've used alchemy to invent physics, essentially. So the question about basically I had a bunch of writings which were like my starting ground. I thought, and that's when I decided I need to write a book where the first half I'm going to debunk modern science, and the second half I'm going to talk about alchemy. So the alchemical process there is what they call the nigredo and the albedo, or the blackening and the whitening. So this is the idea that of like breaking down all your like attachments and all the stuff that like sort of floats around your ego, your thoughts, your fantasies, like breaking that down with like fierce logic and just like one after another. And then the second half with the alchemy is then like building up a new conception of science. Even though it's not new, of course, I'm not proposing a new theory. I'm just showing the old science. So that was the idea. It was like the first half was like this sort of breakdown of everything you know, and then the second half is like building it back up to something which is more empowering and more, I think, stabilizing. More grounding. It's like it brings you into reality. I didn't use AI for any of the writings, but there's 2 images in the book which I used AI to make. That's the image for part 1 and the image for part 2. Everything else was just written, typed by me. I didn't have anyone helping me until actually after it was published. So you'll notice there's a second edition now.
Yeah.
So because I published it myself. I didn't expect I would be able to get a publisher, and I was afraid of actually just putting it out to a publisher and going through that whole process. So I did my best to do it all myself. And like they say, as soon as you publish a book, the first thing you learn is all the mistakes you made. So there was a few like little errors in the initial version. I did a few updates, and then a lady who was a professional proofreader. She was a court-appointed proofreader, and she was now retired. And she reached out and she said, "Look, I love your book." She's like, "But I couldn't help. But there's lots of places where you could improve the punctuation and all that." And she's like, "Would you mind if I give you a review of it or whatever?" So so she went through and made about 2,000 suggested changes to like sentence structure and stuff like that to like just improve the English, as it were. So it was a big bit of work, but I went through and just like tightened the whole thing up, and and then that's when I released a second edition, which is, I think, more readable and more polished. Yeah.
I've got the first edition, but I certainly resonate with you. When I published my book as well, like no matter how many times I read it through and ran it by a couple of people who were in my circle, then you get the printed version. You're like, oh, blimey, now this.
Yeah, it's just like right away. You're just like, oh.
Yeah. Even though you've meticulously looked through what you thought was every line, and then all of a sudden 3 or 4 things.
But I think it keeps us humble. Hey, and I think we got to remember we are all humans. We are all sinners. And I mean, as I say in the book, like the one of the ways to see what is of God and what is of man is that everything of God is eternal and everlasting, whereas everything made by man is sort of temporary and imperfect. And I think I mentioned that in the intro or maybe later in the book. But so you see like the stars, the sun and the moon and the plants and nature and everything, it just goes on eternally. All the stuff that man didn't create, it's always there. It's just like always ongoing. It's like everlasting. But all the stuff that's man-made, it decays over time, and it usually has like imperfections within it.
But interestingly, I think in your book, the music chapter, you really, let me see if I can find the quote. There's an amazing quote that you had about music that was really, really powerful. And it was something around the power of music. Here we are. Music is immortal, timeless, and infinitely reproducible, and yet it can't be tarnished or degraded. Once the quality is established, it radiates through time like a crystal of sound in the cavern of the collective consciousness. Wow.
Thank you.
That's a great... I mean, and that's incredible in terms of encapsulating the power of sound, I think, isn't it?
That is a good quote. And music is, I guess, an exception to what I just said, and in many ways. Although usually any musical recording will have some imperfections in it if you ask the artist, but
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
the listener may not notice them, right?
Yeah, sure.
But or the listener sees them as a feature, and the artist sees it as a bug or something like that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, quite often the inner critic will be perfectionistly going, "Well, I made that error," and then you might listen back to it, and you know, a recording of it, and people might not notice it. And then sometimes it's nice if there's a happy accident or something, you know. Yeah. Sometimes I've done musical performances and I've had to adapt to something, and then you go, well, it's a good learning thing, and other people can see it because like you're outside the comfort zone, you're in that risk place where you're kind of, and like you said earlier, risk is a big sort of concept nowadays, isn't it? And sometimes feeling the burn or the uncomfortable feeling is quite important as well.
Yeah.
So and there was there was one thing that you were sort of mentioning, perhaps a belief that you have around God, and there was an interesting thing I was reading in a book that I thought I might share with you. There's a book I think I was chatting to you about the other day called "The Force Is in You" by somebody called Ethan Carter. And there's a lovely quote that says, "Religions put different names on who God is. However, intention is the common thread which unites them," which I thought was like a really kind of lovely, simplistic kind of thing. Yeah, because you know, I do believe there is a divine source, but I don't necessarily ascribe to any kind of particular belief system around religion. Mm-hmm. But it does seem to be something that's at the heart of your alchemical kind of understanding and process, isn't it? That the power of intention is infinite, really.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, the alchemical sort of view of, you know, God and the cosmos is really just that Manly P. Hall summed it up very well. He said, man is a mortal God and God is an immortal man. So the idea is that the universe, and it's the universe in its essential like structure and form is man-like, you know, human-like, male and female, of course. Yeah. But humanoid, and has then sort of divided itself into, you know, the multiplicity of humanoids, which would be called the microcosm. Yeah. So so the microcosm would be us, the human, the small human, and the macrocosm would be the universe, the God man, if you like. Yeah. And because that was different to what I learned at university. Of course, I learned that the macrocosm was, you know, the stars and the galaxies, and you know, all the neutron stars and the Big Bang and everything. That's the macrocosm, and the microcosm is the electrons and the protons and the neutrons, right? That's you know, that's a shift, right? Because if you go back in history, that's not what macrocosm and microcosm meant. You know, it was really tied into this idea that the human soul is the form of the universe. The universe expresses itself through this form. Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating experience with so many layers, sort of being alive in these beautiful bodies that we've been gifted by that divine process of a man and a woman coming together to create us, and then something, you know, absolutely incredibly magical happens. I've got two beautiful children who are now grown up, and I know you've got a family as well. It's just an absolutely fascinating, and enhancing kind of experience, isn't it? So the one thing I was going to perhaps come back to, we visited at the start of the interview, was just when I left you this review on Amazon, there was something called David Hawkins' scale of consciousness that I referred to, and I said that your book scored an impressive 934 out of 1,000. And I think at the start of the interview, I didn't really explain that I got that information by muscle testing, and that was how I'd kind of found, and when I'd left the review, and I think you'd initially misinterpreted that it was an app, but actually, interestingly, some of the other muscle testing I did around the book, there's one chapter which I won't use particular phraseology, but it might connect to globe theory. Could be one way of expanding it. But that tested as 1,000 out of 1,000, absolutely true when
Wow.
so that one seemed in no doubt whatsoever when I was muscle testing that with divine source and asking questions using muscle testing. So that might be of interest, for people. I think there can be some tricky topics, so the other thing that I was then going to link into was Hermeticism, which is some of the principles that you've been talking about. Now, there's the principle of mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. And you can find all these on the internet, and they're fascinating reads. I think it's, if you pronounce it correctly, it's the Kybalion, or Kybalion is one of the books that espouses.
Yeah. So sorry, you asked me earlier. Yeah, that was definitely one of the earlier books I read after seeing some documentaries online. Yeah, the Kybalion, and then the Corpus Hermeticum. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I muscle tested that, it was saying, I found this quite curious. So it said only 4 out of the 7 calibrated as true with divine source. So I just thought I'd bring that up conceptually, because there might be people kind of out there who, I think with some of the Hermetic stuff, it can read a little bit abstract, spacious, reading between the lines, wordplay, all sorts of stuff. And I've always sort of somehow had this like slight intuition of don't blindly accept it. There's a slight caution energy that I've had intuition wise about it. I haven't really done too much more muscle testing, but I just thought even when people are watching this, it would be quite a cool thing to share with you as a research tool. You could obviously, there's videos on my channel where you can learn how to muscle test, and you can do it with learn how to practice it at home, and you can almost use it like your own research tool and filter. And then something else that I've got noted down just out of interest, it says the 3 of them that aren't true are potentially distractions to lead people to the duality principle, which divine source, when I asked, said was a mind control trick. A curious, I think I sent that then to you in an email, and I didn't kind of follow up with you, but I just thought that would be an intriguing offering in this extensive conversation. Something that I need to kind of look into in a bit more detail, but I just thought it might be a curious, interesting thing to share with you. I don't know if you've got any instant thoughts to it, or what you make of it.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that these 7 Hermetic axioms were not written by Hermes Trismegistus, right? So the Kybalion was written by these 3 initiates, one of whom I think was Waite, the Rider Waite tarot deck. Is it Arthur Edward Waite? I think he's one of the authors of the Kybalion. I'm not sure who the other 2 are. But yeah, so it's based on the teachings of Hermes, but it's a more modern take on it. And as far as I know, Hermes never wrote down 7 laws like that. That's a modern interpretation of the Hermetic. So it's interesting if it's not, like you say, that they're not 100% true, or that they're maybe misleading. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and you referred to perhaps the Bible. I mean, there's been various versions of the Bible, and some of them are substantially changed over time, haven't they, as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, I read the King James. I've got the original like 1611 one and stuff, but yeah, I mean, it does. Yeah, obviously it's been changed a lot. But yeah, I had to read the Bible. Yeah, I didn't start reading it till I was like nearly 40 years old, maybe a little bit before 40. And, it ties a lot of things together, because, it was like the first book, right? The first English book, basically, more or less. And so what I found was like almost all references, like all symbolism seems to have its origins in there, so it helps to like connect things together. And a lot of the alchemical symbology and references as well, they make sense, because people at that time, they read the Bible. So if they make a symbol or a reference, it's usually a reference to the Bible.
Okay.
You know, because yeah, that was like the first book like it, you know, of its kind, and it sort of seeps into everything, you know. And I, you know, I read it as wisdom as well. So I mentioned this in the book. So I'm not religious, you know. I don't go to a church, and I have plenty of beefs with churchy people who, even though I think we should get along and agree on a lot of things, but the fact that I just don't go to their church is always an issue, you know. It's like because I find so church people tend to think if you don't come to my church and do things this way, then you're out of the club, you're irrational or whatever. So I do encounter that quite a lot from churchy people, but it doesn't put me off the Bible. I still think the Bible is a great book that's absolutely full of wisdom. And you know, I read it to extract wisdom, and there's lots of it in there.
Sure. And so that brings me neatly onto the idea of alchemy and how you apply it in your life, or how you propose people could implement in their life. I know you've got a really cool little video on YouTube about, is it humors, or did I get the pronunciation right?
Well, I mean, I just called them humors. I don't know how that it was pronounced back in the day or whatever, but yeah.
But that's one way that you talk about how you can apply alchemy from a health perspective. I'd be interested to know, how do you feel that alchemy is embedded in the various different levels of your life? Because I think that could be, I think people trying to get that idea of how can I use this might be an appealing idea for people, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, you know, I always come back to, like, the first thing that really started to change is to see the fire, earth, air, and the water in everything. So there's nothing that you can see that isn't made from either fire, earth, air, or water, or some combination thereof. But our brain, because of the way we're programmed in this very sort of reductionist, materialistic view, we look at things and we see many different pieces. We see something very complicated. You know, if you take, for example, this keyboard here, for example, right? It's like you know, it's got lots of buttons and lots of symbols and letters, and there's all this like circuitry inside and all that, and you know, it looks like it's got a complicated thing like a computer or a phone or whatever. But when you break it down elementally, it's just earth. The whole thing is just earth. And when it's got electricity inside of it, that's fire. And so what you find is, like with technology, actually, almost all technology is just earth and fire. It's metal or plastic or, you know, wood or something like that, joined together into certain ways, and it's channeling electricity through it, which is like fire in the wire. And so, you know, so all technology is just fire and earth. So that's one way in which, you know, you can really start to simplify things and understand how things work on a really deep level. You know, because, I mean, we're taught, for example, that chemistry was invented by alchemists. Okay, so alchemists invented chemists, essentially. So it's chemistry is alchemy without the al. And al is said to be a spiritual term. Of course, it's the root of all, as in the all, and as in all is one, or all is mind, as they say as well. So, yeah. So anyway, so alchemists, they invented chemistry, all the glassware and the alembics and the distillers and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that is, then we apply that to our lives in the form of like cooking. You know, a kitchen is a sort of reduced kind of chemistry lab / alchemical lab. So one of the first places to notice is in your cooking, right? You're doing alchemical processes all the time. You're bringing fire, you're controlling fire for the start. Big part of alchemy is about control over fire. So that's what you've got with your hobs and your oven and things like that. You're able to control heat very carefully in order to transform foodstuff from raw ingredients into meals. You're washing stuff, which is like dissolution. That's an alchemical process to dissolve something in water and wash it and then evaporate the water off again. That's a purification process. Drying something in an oven, combining ingredients together in specific harmonic proportions in order to produce something new, like making bread, for example. Making bread is a good form of alchemy, particularly sourdough bread, because you're then employing a fermentation process, which is another alchemical process, another purification process. So yeah, things like sourdough, kombucha, and then ultimately spirits like whiskey and vodka and stuff like that, which actually they go through 7 whole steps of purification from the matter that you start with, say barley in the case of whiskey. You get the barley, that's then broken down, pulverized, washed. It goes through, it's combined with other things, and then it goes through this process. It gets distilled, it gets bottled at the end. There's basically 7 processes of purification that it goes through for the barley to become the whiskey. And whiskey, of course, is called spirit. Yeah. And barley is called matter. And so this is what alchemists mean when they say it's like you're converting matter into spirit, right? It's like that's how it's done. And every nation basically has distilleries making a spirit. Almost every nation has its own spirit or drink that it sells, as part of its like national identity.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a whiskey drinker again until sort of midlife, till about my 40s. I started like trying a bit of whiskey and being like, actually I get it. I really get it. I mean, they put so much effort into making this stuff. Like the alchemy of whiskey is obviously a big deal, right, in Scotland. And a big source of like national pride. So so alchemy is used in industry, and anywhere where things are being transformed. Another area that's quite interesting is in the making of metals. So we're sort of taught about metals as if they're extracted. They use that word a lot, like the metals are extracted from the earth or from the mines or whatever. But with the exception of gold, I think for the most part that's not exactly true, right? They actually they take rocks out of the earth, a specific type of stone, and then the stone is then put through several alchemical processes where it's like broken up, it's like washed in acid, it's like dried out and then melted down. There's all this like different things that happen to it. And then it gets to the end of the series of processes and it's just a white powder, like talcum powder. Like say we're talking about silver, for example, or aluminium or something. So it's a rock that gets completely washed and bashed and polished and all sorts until it's just a white powder, and then they melt the white powder and then they set it, and that's how you get your bar of metal or your bar of aluminium. So when I looked at it, it actually looked more like a transformational process rather than an extraction process. So there's just different ways of thinking about things, you see, because alchemy is all based on transmutation, whereas modern science denies that transmutation is even possible. It's a taboo subject in modern science. So they tell you that chemical elements cannot be transmuted one into another. You can't turn lead into gold, or you can't even turn lead into copper, say, right? It's like every substance is its own atom and it's basically stuck like that. But whereas the alchemists believe that you could transmute one substance into another with the right application of heat, and the right amount of heat at the right temperature, and so on, you can change substances one into another. So that's another thing that just comes around as you start to look at things more alchemically. It's you look at things in terms of transformation rather than things as being these like isolated atoms. And it's really useful with the body as well, with healing the body. Because I'll just end on this one. When I was trained in quantum physics, when I would think about my body, it was the craziest thing, because I was imagining all these atoms, all just like hanging together by invisible forces. And if something went wrong in my body, like some pain or whatever, I'm thinking, what's going on here? Is it like the atoms are, are the atoms breaking apart, or like it's just like, it's so complex to imagine these trillions and trillions of atoms all hanging together magically to make up the human body. But when you think about it in terms of fire, earth, air, and water, it's actually much simpler and easy to understand, because we've got earth in our bodies with the bones and the skin and the muscles and stuff. We've got water. It's like our blood and sweat and tears and our semen, and all this is all water. And then we've got the air which we breathe, the life, the breath of life, and then the fire, which is our awareness, is our heartbeat, it's our motive force, it's our willpower. So yeah, just everything is simpler when you look at it in terms of fire, earth, air, and water than if you look at it in terms of atoms and molecules, or even cells. A lot of people talk about cells all the time. They're like, oh, my cells, I got to do this for my cells. And but cells have only been observed in vitro. That in like a petri dish, like there's actually no evidence that there's cells in the body, because you can only see them after the substance has been removed from the body. So there's a chance that maybe the cells form after the material has been removed from the body. You just don't know. We don't know if that's how it operates inside the body, right? It's still a mystery, really, like how that all works. So but again, fire, earth, air, and water, well, they have very specific properties that can be measured. They have certain behaviors and traits, that are easy to relate to. Fire is drying, water is wet, So they have relatable qualities, and they just enable us to understand things in a much more relatable way.
So that brings me to a thought that I'd had when I was reading a book that was related to the concept potentially of ether. So my question was, when I was reading this book called "The Forces in You" by Ethan Carter, I think I referred to it earlier. One of the powerful things he was saying was we speak into the air, and because the air is composed of water, and we know from scientific studies that water can store memory. Everything that we speak and say is stored into water, and that's why when I've read all your stuff about alchemy and your book, in essence, all and even interviews, talking and putting things into water, getting stored energetically is quite a kind of powerful kind of thing. And so I just wondered, what's your perspective on, say, ether or chi energy or life energy? Do you see, because I think you've written about it in your book, and I've heard you sort of comment on that in interviews. I just wonder what your take is on that.
Yeah, no, good question. Actually, I'll go back to what you were saying earlier about dowsing and stuff. So I got into making organite.
Okay, yeah.
You seen these?
I saw there's one in your book, I think, isn't there?
Yeah. So during like lockdowns and all that, I was took it up as a sort of new hobby, making these organite things, and trying to understand what is going on there, because you've got two sides. You've got one group of people, like the physicists and the materialists, telling you it's just nonsense, it's pseudoscience, it's just a bunch of colorful rocks, all together looking pretty. And then you've got people saying, oh no, it's processing energy, it's cleansing the ether and all this kind of stuff. So I wanted to make some myself, and actually try and measure how powerful this is and what it's actually doing. And it is to do with ether, and so what I came to understand from like analyzing the organite, which has like small metal pieces in it, and then crystals, and then like a quartz point in the middle with a copper coil around it, and it's this essentially focusing energy. So any energy that goes into it in the form of heat or light or anything that's absorbed into it will sort of like bounce around in there and ultimately get focused upward toward the point of the pyramid. And then this creates a vortex in the ether. That's the claim, right? So now I wanted to try and test whether that was actually happening or not. So one of the ways we do it is to put a piece of orgonite in the freezer, put it on like the middle shelf, and then put a bowl of water on the shelf above it, and then leave it to freeze. And then what we found is the bowl of water, you can see that the water was twisting when it froze. You can see the effects of the vortex in the freezing patterns. And also it was pushed up in the middle. So you could tell the water was being pushed up and rotated when it was above the orgonite, right? So that was sort of verifying what people were saying. Is creating a vortex in the ether. You can't measure it with technology, but you can measure it with life. It actually has to be something living that measures it. And so this got me into the dowsing, pendulum dowsing. Okay. So I found something called the Bovis scale. Have you heard of this?
I haven't.
So I guess it's similar to the David R. Hawkins scale, but it's a scale for measuring like life force energy, and it doesn't have like an upper limit. So it's just 0 to infinity essentially. And you can display it on a chart, and then using pendulum dowsing, just like you're saying, you ask, to be, what is the strength of this piece? And so, using that process, I went and, measured the strength of all these various orgonite pieces and other things as well, like plants and, other household objects and stuff like that. And I spent a whole bunch of time doing that in like 2021, 2022. And it was all consistent. I was getting consistent results again and again, even like if I didn't know which one I was holding and stuff like that. I was like actually getting like consistent numerical results for the strength. And it made sense as well. The results, when you looked at like how much material was in this piece, and this is a smaller piece, it has less strength and so on. Like, the results all made sense. And so it's a similar sort of thing, like with the pendulum dowsing and just having an actual scale and letting it move to the number on the scale that represents the answer you're looking for. So so I started to understand ether a bit better after working on all that. And so orgonite is a kind of etheric technology. Essentially, you're making a stone. That's what it is. It's a stone. I mean, these things are very hard to break. I've never actually seen a broken one. I mean, the you might break the tip or whatever, but you're not to break the whole thing. It's so solid. It's a stone, but it has the geometry of the pyramid, which focuses energy. And in there as well, you've got a single terminated quartz crystal in the tip of the pyramid, so that also focuses the energy. And then the copper coil, which, as you know, creates a torus field around it. So you have this sort of triple torus field energy, all kind of like concentrated in the tip of the pyramid. And, I think it just creates a sort of circulation in the ether, which is beneficial to life in the same way that it's better for water to be circulating than it is for it to be stagnant.
Sure, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's creating circulation in the ether, which just keeps things more vitalized and just gives more creative energy and stuff like that for plants and for your thoughts and everything. And I really felt like our house, after we started making orgonite, I felt like we harmonized our house like so much. Like things just got like much more neat and tidy and better like room design and all that. We went through a lot of transformation while we were making those orgonites. It was I think they do have an effect.
Yeah, it's lovely. It sounds like a very real kind of testing it out kind of lived experience. Again, going back to that experiential living kind of approach that you're testing something out. I just want to briefly show you, if I can, something that might be of interest. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, if this will be focused or not. I have something here called I don't know if you can see, it's called a Tesla coil, and it's called It's not really
Yeah,
gonna.
no, it's all blurred out, but I think I caught a glimpse of it. Is it one of those multi-wave oscillator coils? Is it?
It's called a KRT perfect spiral antenna, and so it's got a Tesla coil on it. And I bought it at a kind of health show, and one day, a number of years ago, I had an accident where I got knocked off my bike by a car, and I had some nerve damage. And I taped this to my foot overnight, just as an experiment. And the next day, when I went for a walk, the amount of sensation that had returned at the bottom of my foot, I was just like walking with my son, was going, I can't believe how different my foot is. And it was just literally, and I was emailing this company, and they were talking about how this was all out of Tesla's technology. It was one of these things that were just a beautiful test something out and then getting a physical outcome and going really surprised. And so I just thought I'd mention it, and that's an idea, because I wanted to neatly go into the next bit of conversation, which was vortex mass, because you mentioned vortexes. The last chapter of your book is around vortexes and how it's perhaps an area that's not massively talked about out there, so to speak. It's a little bit of an area, like you say, it's present in water and nature quite frequently. And so one of the things, I saw a video, I can't remember the exact place I saw on YouTube, but it was about vortex maths, and it was a little symbol that's in one of your books, and the power of the numbers 3, 6, and 9. And I thought it could be quite interesting for perhaps you just to explain your, I think it's page 241 of the original book. And it is, you said, in general, there's a couple of principles: either numbers reduce to 9 every time, or they oscillate between 3 and 6, or they repeat a cycle of 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. Do you recall that from the book?
Yes. Yeah. So with vortex-based mathematics was there was a bunch of videos done by a guy called Marco Rodin, and I was looking at this stuff back in, I think, 2015, 2016. Now a lot of it is kind of hard to digest, like low quality videos with loads and loads of like math in them. But the math is generally pretty simple, and it's all based on this idea of the doubling of numbers.
Yeah.
So when you double a number, let's say you take the number 8, you double it, you get 16, and then you reduce it down to a single digit by adding the digits together. So 8 would go to 16, and then 1 plus 6 is 7. So that, yeah. And so that's what he's doing. He's doubling numbers and then reducing them back down to a single digit.
Yeah, yeah.
And he observed that there's a certain pattern that occurs. So with the number 9, for example, if you double it, it always reduces to 9. So 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. 27, 2 plus 7 is 9. 36, 3 plus 6 is 9, and so on. So like every multiple of 9, or every harmonic of 9, is reducible to the number 9. But if you look at the numbers 3 and 6, what you see is that the pattern bounces back and forward. So if you double 3, you get 6. If you double 6, you get 12. 1 plus 2 is 3. So it's going back to 3. And then, so on, like 2 plus 4, 24 is 6, goes back to 6. So it bounces back and forward, 3, 6, 3, 6. And then with the other numbers, the numbers besides 3, 6, and 9, they go through this pattern of, I remember what it is now, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. And it just goes round and round like that. And so Marco Rodin tells us that the numbers have, based on this vortex image, which I don't know, maybe you can put it in the link in the description or something. I'll show it here. There it is.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
He actually calls it the fingerprint of God, or God's petroglyph. So with that, then I was looking at it in relation to musical tuning.
Right.
So, we talk about 432 tuning versus 440 tuning. And, a lot of people make claims about it that, historical claims or claims about healing and stuff like that. But I didn't want to make any claims of that nature. I just wanted to just look at the math and why the math is interesting. And so in Marco Rodin's work, he groups the numbers into three groups. He says that 1, 7, and 4 are electric positive, like positive electric numbers, and 2, 8, and 5 are negative electric numbers, and 3, 6, and 9 are magnetic numbers. And of course, this ties into what Tesla said, which is if you understand the 3, 6, and 9, right, you'll have a key to the universe. So when I went through all the frequencies in the 432 scale, I realized that most of them reduce to 3, 6, and 9.
Right.
So the 432 scale is therefore a highly magnetic scale. It's not entirely magnetic, but it's very highly magnetic. Like 10 of the 12 notes all reduce to 3, 6, and 9. But if you look at the 440 equal temperament scale, it's all electric. It all reduces to the electric numbers, So that was quite an interesting observation, just a difference in those scales just based on the numbers.
Sure, yeah. I mean, when I saw this video about vortex mass, it was kind of saying that the 9 was the holiest of numbers, and it was almost like the pendulum was going between the 3 and the 6. And then if it reached in the middle, then it's a kind of place of balance and perfection, this kind of idea, which was intriguing. And being a little bit of a kind of nerd, when I discovered new bits of information, there was an alphabet of numbers that you can number from 1 to 9, the letters of the alphabet. And I created a spreadsheet so that I can type in a word and I can see whether it adds up to 9 or not, for example. And I've now started to expand it so I can do sentences as well, so that you can, if I'm creating a title for my website, that's one of the practical applications. I might know that the title adds up to 9, which is proper nerdy, but never from a vibrational point of view, it's quite an interesting sort of thing to do. I think. I think one of the things that I was going to segue into then was about the Pythagorean comma, because you were talking about sacred music, and my understanding, like I'm not a big person with numbers, but it appears that within the Pythagorean comma, there's a musical numerical anomaly that's never really been resolved. And when I was doing some muscle testing with Divine Source, it's saying, it is possible to come up with a musical structure that doesn't have any mathematical imperfections or anomalies, but nobody's figured it out yet. And so I just thought I'd put it out to you to see what you thought, because I know, having listened to your head flux related educational stuff around frequency, and you're clearly pretty amazing with numbers and theories. I just wondered what your take might be on that.
Yeah, the Pythagorean comma is really interesting. So, you have this thing, the circle of fifths, which is where, if we start on C and we go up in fifths up to G, up to D, and so on, then after 12 times, we'll come back to C on the keyboard. So after 12 intervals of 1/5, we'll go through 12. So let me start that again. So 12 fifths will take you up to the C 7 octaves higher than where you started. All right, and now 7 octaves is basically the range of musical performance, right? You're only going to play notes within 7 octaves. You're not going to play any notes higher or lower than in that 7 octave range. But now, so when you do the math and you say, well, if I go up a fifth 12 times, I come back to C, then the C that I come back to must be the 7th octave of the C you started from. It turns out the math is like slightly off. So like 12 fifths is not exactly equal to 7 octaves.
Right.
All right, and that's the mathematical trick. So 7 octaves is like 2 to the power of 7.
Yeah.
But 12 fifths is Yeah, it's something. I think it's like 5/3 to the power of 12 or something. And basically, the two are not equal, and the difference between them is very small. It's like 1.01, and this is called the Pythagorean comma. Now, I think for the purposes of making music, it's not an issue, as I say, because you very rarely are you playing notes that are way up in the range of the 7th octave. You know, you might go up there occasionally, but you're certainly not going to go beyond it.
Right.
So it doesn't affect the limits of music too much. You can still work and have a harmonious music within it. But I did notice that the same number, or approximately the same number, does tend to crop up in other areas of life. Like, for example, 440 and 432. If you type that in a calculator, if you do 440 divided by 432, you get 1.01, the same value as the Pythagorean comma. And then, again, if you look at the length of the year, for example, we have 365 days in the year, but a lot of people think, well, why isn't there 360? You know, we just have 1 degree for each day, right? And then that would be just nice and easy and harmonic. But if you take 365 and divide it by 360, you also get 1.01, the Pythagorean comma. So it's you know, it crops up in a few of these places, which again relates to time cycles. And you know, things maybe being slightly offset from what would be considered perfect. And it's like maybe that imperfection kind of has to be there, or maybe it's a feature of the universe, something deeper. I'm not sure. I need to do more research into it, but it's very interesting.
It's a curious piece, isn't it? That slight anomaly is that the secret to the perfection? You know, just like it could be that we're existing on things that are almost quite right, but not quite right, and maybe maybe the day when somebody goes, boom, I've kind of come up with a solution to this. It could be something quite fascinating and interesting, couldn't it? Because there's all sorts of bits of hearing as well, frequency wise, that are outside of audible hearing range, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, so we hear like the frequencies are what we call like the treble, but you know, that's mostly noise. You know, when you get down to the, you know, the sort of like the hiss and the, you know, the shimmer of music, you know, is mostly like noise. But the actual like harmonic, like the note spectrum, is pretty much contained to 7 octaves. You never really go outside of those 7 octaves, even though there are frequencies, you know, they're not musical frequencies, they're more like noise frequencies. Yeah. So yeah, I think, you know, in general, like music is actually some of the best training you can have for you know, looking at any of this stuff, like spiritual stuff, or you know, just life in general. You know, there's music in everything. You know, they talk about the music of the spheres, right? The music of the cosmos. Robert Flood talks about there's like 3 kinds of music. Essentially, there's the inaudible music of the cosmos, which would be, you know, cycles of time which are too low in frequency for us to hear with our ears, but they are there nevertheless. Those sounds are there, but they're like below. And then you have sort of musica mundana, which is like sort of like mundane music, if you like, which would be you know, songs that human beings write just to sing about how you're feeling, or sing about breaking up from your girlfriend or whatever, right? That's you know, it's based on the human voice, it's based on human experience. That would be like mundane music. And then there's musica instrumentalis, which would be like what we do, like the electronic or instrumental music, where it's actually, there's no voice in it, but it's designed to mimic the inaudible music of the cosmos. So it reflects the cycles of the cosmos in the instrumental music. And I always felt like that when I was working on it, that we were the sounds and the rhythms and stuff like that were actually they're cosmic in nature, but we've sped them up and put them into music, right?
Okay, yeah.
They're happening much more slowly, over big time cycles.
Yeah.
So yeah, music is wonderfully cosmic.
And you can quite frequently read interviews with people who are musicians who, there's a really talented musician called Mike Banks who Underground Resistance, and he talks about some of his big tracks, and he's like, his mother said to him, Mike, how did you make that? And he's gone, I've got no idea. It just kind of like was channeled through. And then when I heard about hearing that, it was amazing because he possibly was tuning into a divine source, I think, in terms of channeling music in a really magical way that is difficult to understand from the analytical point of view.
Yes, yeah. In fact, I've seen a great quote, which is that alchemy is the art of turning something ordinary into something extraordinary, sometimes in a way that cannot be explained.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like that. Sometimes you just can't explain how you came up with the tune. It's just, it's just it happened in the moment kind of thing.
Well, these things are fascinating. There was just one last question, if it's all right, Steve, that I wanted to ask you. I'm really grateful for all your time and energy. It was just on alchemy in your book. One of the things I noticed was all the reading you've done of all these kind of alchemical texts. When I was reading it, I thought that there's quite a lot of male-related talk about alchemy. I think in your book you said something like maybe an alchemist needs a good wife. So I wonder if a female reader might take from that a female can't be an alchemist. And I just wondered whether a lot of these old texts could be written by a male mindset back in the past. And I just wondered what your thoughts. There's lots in your book about the importance of a male and female union on multiple different levels. So I just wondered what your take might be on that little last question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've had a few ladies point that out to me, that good wife bit, and accuse me of patriarchal thinking or something like that.
No,
but no, I mean, I wrote the book from a masculine perspective. I made that decision early on that I was, because I'm a man, would write it from a masculine perspective. But then in all cases in these old books, when they talk about man, they are talking about mankind, and the knowledge is universal enough to be useful to men and women. But in every case of an alchemical book written by a man, as far as I know, I've never seen an old alchemical book written by a woman. All these men, they had wives, of course. I mean, like, I couldn't have done. I mean, I've been with my wife 32 years. I couldn't have done anything that I've done in my life without the support and love and constantly talking to each other, working things out together, getting through things together. So. That's why I said that. I mean, because yes, of course you could do alchemy on your own, but you're going to have a lot more on your shoulders than if you were part of a marriage. And and in fact, the marriage, the alchemical marriage is not just a play on words. This what they call the alchemical wedding or the alchemical marriage. The more I started looking at that, it's actually, that is what marriage is. That's the whole ceremony of like one human being, one man and a woman being wedded together is an alchemical marriage. It's a ceremony. The golden ring represents the golden ring around an eclipse. When the sun and the moon go into an eclipse, there's a golden ring in the sky. The golden ring represents that because it's the coming together of the sun and the moon, which is the heavenly feminine and the heavenly masculine coming together. And they're the exact same size. No one bit left over, right? They're the exact same size. And there's this golden ring. And, that's what marriage is. And, when you have a loving marriage, you become a formidable team. And that's really it. And that's all I meant by that. It's like, if you want to do really, really good work, it's better to do it as part of a partnership and a family than to just go on your own and just be the hermit. That would be my advice. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you clarifying that, and because it's a beautiful note to end the interview on the power of love, really, and the power of two, and often creating beautiful children, and that's how we're all on this earth. So I think that's a beautiful little detail to just kind of like come to, like at the end of a beautiful DJ set. We've been on a journey. Yeah. I'm very grateful for your time and energy. I hope lots of people will click on the links below that I put to your book and go and buy loads of head flux music to listen to in the background as well, because your music's fantastic. And so, yeah, I wish you all the well with your, fingers crossed there's a new book coming as well in the future. That would be amazing.
Thanks very much, Graham. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And yeah, I definitely do want to make a second book, but sorry to say I haven't started it yet. So I've got a bunch of other things I need to get done in the meantime, but it's all brewing, and I've got notes and plans. So God willing, I'll be able to get that second book written at some point.
Yeah, the alchemy process is subtly there in the background, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Lovely. Well, I send all my love to you and your family in Scotland, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day with the beautiful sunny weather.
Yeah, thanks. Likewise. All the best to you.
All right. Cheers, Steve.
Right,
Thanks
bye-bye.
very much.